Harvard, an institution entangled with American slavery and its legacies in many ways, recently created a 130-page report to document the past and try to make amends for institutional wrongs. The First Church in Roxbury, Massachusetts, has chosen a similar path in 2023 to deal with its own slavery legacy. At least 5 of our Pequot relatives were enslaved at Harvard during its formative years. Our sachem's wife and 2 of their sons were 3 of the Pequot captives held there. Many more Pequot people were enslaved across Massachusetts, with some also bound to people of the First Church of Roxbury.
The Harvard Slavery Report contains 7 specific institutional recommendations to help Harvard take responsibility for its past and pursue meaningful repairs with people impacted. First Church of Roxbury members have not yet contacted or been contacted by our tribe.
Slavery in New England began when early colonists enslaved and sold our relatives while killing and relocating most eastern woodland tribes to remove us from the land and resources coveted by colonizers. Contrary to popular belief, colonial New England ships often carried enslaved people and critical supplies to Bermuda and the Caribbean islands. They brought back slave-produced commodities like sugar and molasses, most of which was then re-exported throughout the British Empire. As early as the 1630s, there were already more than 20 ships engaged in trade between New England and the British Caribbean.
In 1636, the year Harvard was founded, merchants at Marblehead built and rigged a ship, 120 tons and very fast, called Desire. During the summer of 1636, the Desire set sail carrying 17 Pequot war prisoners, who were to be sold as slaves in Bermuda on the instructions of John Winthrop.
A major figure in early colonial history, who served several terms as governor and lieutenant governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Winthrop was a member of the original Committee as to Ye College at Newtown, an early name for Harvard.
Winthrop himself enslaved the wife of a Pequot sachem and her 2 children in what he seems to have viewed as an act of Christian benevolence for her protection of the 2 captured English girls on Pequot Hill.
The Massachusetts Bay Colony Body of Liberties, written in 1641, made slavery itself and the slave trade of native people and African people lawful. In the early 1640s, Bermuda minister Patrick Copeland, grateful for Winthrop's remembrance of us sending 12 New England Indians to us, began recruiting the children of wealthy Caribbean plantation owners to attend Harvard.
Harvard men also seized the political opportunity to get colonial legislative approval to steal our Pequot lands.
In 1653, the Massachusetts legislature declared, "To this end, it is desired that the said corporation of the college do appoint some persons in their behalf to find out the places where such land may be freely taken, and to make return as soon as they may, that the court may more particularly and expressly confirm the same." Shortly after this legislative act, the Harvard treasurer, Thomas Danforth, personally selected 4 tracts in Rhode Island and Connecticut, described by the report as territory from which the Pequot had been driven. In the 1600s, Christianizing indigenous people opened up vital new avenues of financial support for Harvard University. The Indian College building, Harvard's first made of brick, was constructed in 1655. Ultimately, however, Harvard enrolled only 5 native students during this era.
By 1670, the Indian College building had been given over to the college's printing press, and in 1690, it was dismantled and its bricks used to construct a new building for the use of white scholars. By 1700, the New Englanders had made at least 19 voyages to Africa and then to the West Indies, the chief route of the slave trade, along with many voyages to other places. In 1709, Massachusetts extended their 1705 slave import tax to apply to enslaved Native Americans while white servants from Europe were paid 40 shillings each when they arrived from overseas.
By the middle of the 18th century, enslaved black people constituted the main source of bound labor in Massachusetts, outnumbering indentured servants, apprentices, and indigenous captives. Slavery would not officially end in Massachusetts until 1783. Hartford's Winthrop House is named for Professor John Winthrop, as well as for his ancestor, the colonial governor, both of whom personally enslaved Native Americans, as well as African American people.
For more than a century, Boston merchants played an essential role in sustaining the sugar plantation economy of the Caribbean. Many of those same merchants were important players in Harvard's early history. Samuel Winthrop, the governor's youngest son, dropped out of Harvard in 1645 and made his way first to Tenerife in the Canary Islands and a year later to the West Indies. Samuel became one of the first large-scale sugar producers in the British West Indies, eventually owning 1/4 of the island of Barbuda and a sugar plantation on Antigua, where dozens of enslaved people labored to produce sugar.
Samuel also served as the deputy governor of Antigua from 1667 to 1669 and was one of the wealthiest men in Antigua when he died. Winthorpe's Bay on the north side of the island memorializes the prominence of Samuel and his descendants in its early colonial history. Years later, Samuel would send 4 of his sons back to New England to be educated and expressed purpose of eventually enrolling them at Harvard. In correspondence with his brother John Jr., then the governor of Connecticut, Samuel asked for help getting his sons admitted to college. During the first half of the 19th century, more than 1/3 of the money donated to Harvard by private individuals came from 5 men who traded slaves and slave goods. The full 130-page Harvard report contains all of the information in this video and much more. Pequot families can get the full report on Pequot at Home or download a full copy with cited research documents online at www.legacyofslavery.harvard.edu/report.